everyone, and welcome. You are joining us for another episode of our Dallas Unplugged podcast. My name is Jolie Angel Robinson. I'm the VP of Government Affairs and Public Policy for Dallas Area Habitat for Humanity. This Dallas Unplugged podcast really lets us dive into the conversation of all things kind of housing, affordable housing, workforce housing. And I've also mentioned the other term that I like to use in this conversation is equitable access to housing. Today, we have an amazingly special guest. I've had the honor to know him for several years. He's done tremendous work here in the city of Dallas. Councilmember Casey Thomas, thank you for joining us today. Anything that you want to share kind of in your intro, Councilmember Thomas?
Well, thank you, Jolie, for having me, and thank you for your years of service with the city of Dallas. My name is Casey Thomas. I've been on the Dallas City Council now for 6 years. I was just recently reelected for my fourth and final term on the city council. I'm born and raised in Dallas, grew up in the Pleasant Grove area, went to Skyline High School, that's where I graduated from, went to the University of North Texas, and I got my Bachelor of Business Administration from UNT, spent 15 years as a classroom teacher prior to serving on the city council. So since I've been on the council, my focus has been on initially economic development and quality economic development, focused specifically south of 30 in Oak Cliff in particular. And then over the past 5 years, I fell in love with workforce development. I recognized the great need. And so I've had an opportunity to provide leadership in several committees here with the city of Dallas. Most recently, I was appointed by a mayor to be chair of our Workforce Education Equity Committee. And as of January 1st, Housing and Homeless Solutions Committee, I was the vice chair. And so in January, the mayor elevated me to serve as chair. What I've been really focused on in between all of those things is the fight on COVID. I serve as our chair of our ad hoc committee on COVID-19 recovery and assistance. And so the past year and a half has been difficult, it's been a challenge. Governing during the pandemic, I think there may be a book I'll write once I leave the council. Governing during the pandemic has been an interesting experience, as well as through a year of engaged social unrest. As a result of the murder of George Floyd, we have seen social justice and racial equity come to the forefront. I was recently appointed as vice chair of the National League of Cities Racial Equity and Leadership Council. Good. And so it's been a pleasure and an honor. And so we're leading the effort on looking at best practices, ways in which we can make sure that this shift is not just temporary, in whatever ways we can make it permanent, we make it permanent. And so it's an honor and pleasure to be with you this morning.
I mean, you have so many tremendous tidbits. I knew you were a teacher prior to joining city council, which is exciting, right? It's an exciting thing for folks to know and for me to know specifically. And I know this wasn't one of the questions, but as you were talking about it, like, how has that history of being a teacher for all of those years, how has that influenced how you go about doing your city council business?
Well, I tell people, and I told people when I first got on the council, I was educating little people, now I'm educating big people. And, and it's so much that I learned when I first got on council that residents of the city of Dallas, especially those who live in south of 30, I changed that as of Wednesday. Now I say south of 30 as opposed to southern Dallas.
I love it.
Residents of West Dallas didn't consider themselves Southern Dallas, but once you know better, you do better. Mm-hmm. So I'm changing my vocabulary to say south of 30. I recognize that residents of south of 30 did not know how to access city services. And so that's been the biggest thing that I've been able to carry over, just that teaching and training and educating people about how city services within the city of Dallas function and how to make the local government work for you.
That's perfect. That's perfect and spot on. Again, we're talking to Councilmember Casey Thomas. He is the council member in District 7, correct? District 7? No, 3, District 3, excuse me. I'm getting my districts mixed up. District 3, he is the council member for District 3. Councilmember Casey Thomas here in the city of Dallas. Dallas Area Habitat uniquely covers not only the city of Dallas, but Dallas County. And so part of what we do when we're talking to some of our elected officials and advocating for affordable housing is reach out to our elected officials. Councilmember Casey Thomas, he is over the Housing and Homelessness Committee. And so he has a critical piece of the equation. Also, racial equity, if you heard him mention racial equity is important and an area that he leads in. And so it's important for the intersection of housing, homelessness, and racial equity. I'm gonna kind of dive right into my questions, Councilmember Thomas. The city of Dallas, the housing focus and policy, why is housing, whether it's affordable housing, workforce housing, equitable access to housing, why is that so important to the city of Dallas?
Well, when I, first began serving on city council and when I was running, what I began to recognize is a lot of my classmates and people that went to school with me around, whether they went to Skyline or not, but the other schools in Dallas ISD, a lot of them had left the city of Dallas, had moved to, local suburbs, City Hill, DeSoto, Duncanville, et cetera. And I was wondering, why so many of them left. And what I began to realize is it was because of the type of housing stock that was not available. We're at a point where we're, have a family, or we're raising kids, or, progressing in our career. And so we need, homes. We need a home of a certain size at a certain price point, and those homes were not available. And as your former president would say, the missing middle.
That's right.
Missing middle. And because so many of us, did the things our parents told us, went to school, got our degrees, got a good job, started our career, we were middle to upper middle income. And because of that, that's the type of homes that we were looking for. And many of them, have not been able, or were not able to find them. And so that's one of the reasons why housing was so important to me, is because I was like, you know what, retain, and you probably remember this, back under the days of Neighborhood Plus, one of the main goals was recruit and retain the middle class. That was one that I just kind of took ownership of, because it fell right in line with that, my mission, which was to bring them back to Dallas. If not, then the next generation, when they, graduated, went off to school, that they would want to come back home and bring that talent and bring that knowledge and experience back to Dallas, so Dallas could continue to grow and thrive and be the great city that it is.
And to your point, that missing middle, people are looking for housing stock. They're looking at the education system. They're probably looking at the school, the feeder pattern that their child might be going to, especially as they're starting families, having kids. They're looking at the distance to and from work, right? They're looking at they're having to include all of these factors. They're looking at safety. They're looking at grocery stores, healthcare, or medical facilities. Folks, and really across the income spectrum, are looking for a variety of those things. And as you mentioned, that missing middle, folks have probably gone off to college. They're trying to come back to home base, but they're looking for somewhere to anchor and plant their families and start the next phase of their career or their life. And do they have housing stock available for them? One of the things I talk about is, and Dallas Area Habitat and Habitat International talks about the cost of home and how expensive it may be. Could you get a different house in a different neighborhood if you lived outside of the city of Dallas? So your time on the council, you're nearing the end. Congratulations on this previous election and all of that. Looking forward to kind of I guess it would be your sunset term, and all that will happen. You've really accomplished a lot. As you mentioned, that teacher in you has been helpful for even me throughout my time and career, even as an employee of the city of Dallas, helping in different ways in the community, and now with Dallas Area Habitat. So thank you. But how does housing fit into like the overall city economics? You talk about that economic development, focus that you have and that you had. How does housing tie into overall city economics?
Housing is critically important as it ties in economic. Uh, on yesterday, well, no, on Wednesday, time's fine. On Wednesday, the council was briefed on the city's draft of our economic development plan and policy. And a key tenet of that is housing. As we're looking at, bringing, relocating companies and things of that nature, well, housing is important to that. If they're going to relocate many of their employees, they want to be able to move here, find somewhere they can stay. If they have families somewhere, a home where they can, raise their families in. And so housing is a critical component of economic development, and making sure that we have a variety of housing stock for individuals. We know a lot of our millennials, and now we have Gen Z. I used to say millennials, but a lot of them are not looking to get a home. They want, just a place that they can stay, an apartment. And many of them have moved to the uptown area. Well, I used to say this as I was getting this focus on retaining and recruiting the middle class. Well, one day, these millennials or these younger Gen Z are going to meet someone, and they're going to decide, they're going to fall in love. They're going to decide that this is someone they want to spend the rest of their life with. And once that happens, they're going to want to buy a home, a house. And so we want to make sure that a variety of housing is available for them now. And then as they get older, and later in life, same thing. Someone, if they choose to stay in place and spend the rest of their time there, we want them to be able to have somewhere they can stay. If they choose to sell a home or give it to, their children and say, you know what, senior living is the way to go. We're seeing more and more senior living apartments, very, very, nice, top quality. They don't have to worry about the yard, they don't have to worry about maintenance, and so because they made good choices early in life, they're in a position to where they can spend their disposable income and their retirement, and when they're not traveling, just be able to have an apartment where they can come to and not worry about all the maintenance.
Absolutely. I know you have a special place in your heart and in your policies and processes for our aging population, for our seniors, our seasoned adults here in the city. So I do appreciate that. Again, y'all, if you're listening, if you're watching Dallas Unplugged, this is our podcast, a wonderful opportunity to dive deeper into the conversation about housing. I've always mentioned kind of 3 ways you can get involved in engagement in a civic way, engagement with nonprofits like Dallas Area Habitat, and of course, Councilmember Casey Thomas, District 3. There's 3 things I'm sure you can do in that district or across the city. That's advocate, that's donate, and volunteer. All folks need your help and your support if you're out there. I love action-oriented conversations as well. So later on, I'll ask Councilmember Casey Thomas how people can get involved. He's really provided some great information for us. So I appreciate you again for joining us. There's this tension of supporting affordable housing or workforce housing within the city of Dallas. Can you unpack that briefly, why that tension exists? What can we do about it as we move forward to support housing in the city?
Yeah, I think I'm glad you asked that question. I just had a zoning case where I was dealing with this same issue over in Westmoreland Station. What we have to do is we have to educate people. I had to get educated. I had to get educated on what AMI really, really means and what that means in the city of Dallas. Simple fact. The average median income for the city of Dallas is 50 to 60,000. 50, 60,000. And so on 2 levels, one, individuals who are making 50, my salary, council member salary, and then those who serve us. And that's how, that's the language I use. We have to take care of those who are serving us. They should have a place to call home as well. And so having these type of conversations That's one of the benefits of being term limited. You can actually lead tough conversations that, you're planting seeds. Later, they're going to really, really germinate because people are beginning to understand why we're having the conversation. There's something called NIMBYism, and that's been the greatest, I think, challenge to affordable, or I prefer to call it workforce housing in high opportunity areas. It has been the greatest challenge. And a lot of it is based on perception. These poor people are going to bring my neighborhood down. They're going to be, not going to take care of their property. They're going to commit a lot of crimes. Those are some of the preconceived notions and false notions that people have when it comes to affordable or workforce housing. So we have to be able to give people good factual information. One of the things that turned the tide on a development that I was just speaking about, the only case I was speaking about, is once people began to understand what AMI is, what that number really is, who, because we have to put a face.
That's it.
Yep. On things like this, even homelessness, we have to put a face on those things, not people's perception, but the actual reality of who these individuals are. That person who comes and gives you quality service at your favorite bar or restaurant every week. That individual, where does that individual live? Have you even thought to take the time to ask them, where do you live? What challenges have you maybe been facing? These individuals, same individuals who were impacted the most by COVID-19 economically. Yeah. Because when bars, restaurants, fitness centers, all these places had to shut down immediately and we had to stay in place, they lost their form of income.
Absolutely.
And so being able to connect the dots, I think, is critically important to be able to have a real, frank, sincere conversation about workforce housing / affordable housing. And we are working right now with our legislators in DC to change the language from low income to affordable housing.
Yes,
There's
yes.
a bill.
Yeah.
There's a bill in Congress right now. I think Congressman Mark Beasley is one of the signers on that bill that will change the language to affordable from low income housing. And perception is reality, and it will make all the difference in the world, not just in Dallas, but across the country. I've got a call in right now to Secretary Fudge. We have a mutual friend, because I want to talk with her about, and it's great what they just did, those vouchers that was just announced for Dallas. I thank the mayor for being on that call. But I think there are more that can be done if she knows that if we're on her radar, and she's looking at being innovative and focusing on equity.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways in which the city of Dallas and the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex can benefit from.
I mean, I just jotted down a whole bunch of notes, right? Like you dropping all the nuggets of gold today. You said language matters. Absolutely, absolutely. Even working in this nonprofit space, talking about housing, removing low income from our vocabulary, right? Talking about affordable housing, workforce housing, and as I've mentioned, equitable access to housing is important. That equitable access to housing really talks about, like, even going back to acknowledging the history of perhaps some discriminatory and racist policies that have left many people out of the ability to own a home and create that generational wealth and pass that down, right? So I applaud that effort to change that language. I think, to your point, it's damaging, and that NIMBYism can flare up, right? And I know many people have heard the term, but really it's just an acronym for not in my backyard. So many of the social things that we try to focus on in the city of Dallas and across our state or country, whether it be addressing those that are experiencing homelessness or housing or whatever that issue is, sometimes people have a perception of a population of individuals that could just is simply false, is not true. And so I love the opportunity to change that language. I think that's extremely critical. You also brought up something else, and you didn't say it explicitly, but the string that you're tying together is that there are local things that have to happen, there are state things that have to happen, and there are federal things that have to happen to change the landscape of housing, right? City council can't do it alone. You can't be focused just on District 3. How can I improve housing in District 3? That's not going to do it alone. All 14 council members aren't going to be able to do it alone and just be thinking about their slice of the pie. But at the local, at the state, and the federal level, really, if we're changing some different levers and legislation, that's where true change happens. So thank you for bringing that up. I think you really covered, honestly, what would you want people to know about housing and the work the city is trying to do. If there's anything you think you want to add to that space, please go ahead.
Well, I think as we begin to come out of COVID, I think as the opportunity presents itself for us to once again gather and do community in-person meetings, having focus groups, breakout sessions at community meetings. You know, my first year in office, I had 20 community meetings because I realized how much people just did not know. And I think as I go into my last term, and I know we're Facebook friends, and I made a post about what I'll be focusing on, you know, I call it God's marching orders for me. A lot of that has to do with continuing that education process. I call it going back to the basics. That's where I started in my first term. That's where I think I'm gonna end, because some of the city's processes have changed according to COVID. And then also there are some city processes that people didn't even understand then. But as it relates to housing specifically, having these conversations, doing these breakout sessions, and I think the opportunity present itself if there's interest for me to partner with Habitat and having these conversations, potentially, you know, if the mayor reappoints me as chair, we're going to have that conversation hopefully in the next few weeks. Being able to go across the city, invite that council member, because that's the district they represent, but as the chair of Housing and Homeless Solutions, going all across the city and having these conversations in different neighborhoods about what is truly affordable housing or workforce housing. You know, what are people's perceptions? What about those who serve us each and every day? Don't they deserve somewhere quality to live? I think putting in the work, that's what I call putting in the work up front will really help us down the road as we begin to really implement our comprehensive housing policy.
I completely agree. I think the education and putting the work up front helps move the process along a lot easier and a lot quicker, because people are, you know, I guess like the Wizard of Oz, they can see behind the curtain, right? It's not like things are happening to them and to their neighborhood without them knowing the process. Anything else as we round up this time? Councilmember Casey Thomas, I always appreciate you and appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. If y'all are out there listening, again, I'm Jolie Angel Robinson, VP of Government Affairs and Public Policy here at Dallas Area Habitat. We're talking to District 3 Councilmember Casey Thomas, talking about the tremendous career that he's had, even starting with his time in education, I think, which has been critical. And if you've been following Dallas politics, I think you can see that in Councilmember Casey Thomas as he leads in a variety of ways. I think you can see that history flow. We talked about how language matters. We've talked about we got to focus on local, state, and federal policies, practices, and legislation to really move the needle on housing. I've always given you 3 ways you can be involved and engaged. That's advocate, donate, and volunteer. Find an organization, pick an organization. Dallas Area Habitat can be one of those. But please advocate, donate, and volunteer. Councilmember Casey Thomas, as we end our time here today, anything you want to talk about how people can get involved? I know you mentioned maybe some listening sessions, breakout sessions, anything to that effect. What can they do? Is there an email address if they're listening and they're like, I want to, you know, be on your distribution list when those things happen? What can they do to stay in touch and get involved?
Absolutely. I'm glad you suggested that. Yes, you can get on our District 3 email distribution list. You can call my office, 214-670-0772. Ask for Yolanda Miller. Once again, Yolanda Miller, 214-670-0772. And say, I'd like to get on the District 3 email distribution list. We post all of our events on social media. We send them out through our emails. You can follow me, Casey Thomas, on Facebook, KCTO7 on Instagram, on Twitter. I try and share as much information as I possibly can. You know, I've developed this philosophy. I guess it was either going into or coming out of COVID. Find your it. That's what everybody needs to do. Find your it, and then get in where you fit in. Whatever your it is, find your it and get in where you fit in. We need you. We need your voice. We need your physical presence. We need your contributions to so many of our organizations that are doing great work pre-COVID and during COVID, and we'll be doing a lot of work coming out of COVID. So we need you. You know, I know I'm not Uncle Sam, you know, but I'm adopting that philosophy. We need you to join us in this effort to make Dallas the best city in the world.
Absolutely. I have nothing else to say after that. Councilmember Casey Thomas, I wish you and your family well. You all have a great one. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Dallas Unplugged. Y'all have a great one.